Why children are more vulnerable to toxic chemicals. There are 4 critical differences between children and adults that account for children's vulnerability to toxic chemicals. First, children experience greater exposure than adults based on their body size. Children have disproportionately large intakes of air, food, and water. Infants, for example, have respiratory rates that are twice as great as those of adults, and they inhale twice as much air. Thus, they are at increased risk of absorbing airborne toxins. Likewise, children eat more food and drink much more water per kilogram of body weight than adults. In fact, children require 6 to 8 times more calories per kilogram of their weight than adults, and a 6-month-old infant drinks 14 times more water per kilogram of their body weight than an adult. The differences between children and adults in dietary exposure become especially striking when you consider their actual diets. Some children consume extraordinary amounts of certain foods, such as milk, juices, and fruits, for certain periods of time in early infancy and childhood. If those foods happen to be contaminated with high levels of pesticides, and, worse yet, if they are contaminated by multiple pesticides, the cumulative dose delivered to the children can be quite large. Another difference between children and adults is that children have a larger surface-to-volume ratio and more permeable skin, 2 factors that lead to greater skin absorption of toxic chemicals. Children's behaviors further exacerbate their intake of toxic chemicals. Most children actively explore their environments, and young children frequently put things in their mouth, including hands and things they pick up and examine. This normal oral exploratory behavior can lead to significant ingestion of toxic substances. Children also spend their time in different physical locations than adults, and these differences can increase their exposures. Infants and young children spend much of their time on the floor. They are therefore at disproportionate risk of exposure to house dust that may be contaminated with lead, brominated flame retardants, or pesticides. Toddlers, because of their short stature, breathe air that is much closer to the ground than that inhaled by adults. They are therefore at increased risk of inhaling vapors of solvents or pesticides that may form layers near the floor. In addition, children are exposed to preschool or school classroom environments and playgrounds. Schools and playgrounds are too often built on relatively undesirable lands, and the facilities may be old, poorly maintained, and poorly ventilated. Second, children's metabolic pathways are immature. Children's ability to break down and excrete toxic chemicals is different from that of adults. In some instances, infants are actually at lower risk of injury by toxic chemicals because they cannot convert the chemicals to their active forms. Nonetheless, in many more cases, children are more vulnerable, because they are less able than adults to detoxify and excrete toxic compounds. Consequently, many toxic chemicals spend more time in the child's body before being excreted. For example, studies show that the adult body can reduce the blood level of one common pesticide, chlorpyrifos, an organophosphate pesticide used around lawns and gardens, by half in 6 hours, but it takes an infant 36 hours to do the same thing. That gives the toxic pesticide 6 times longer to harm the infant's body. Third, children are undergoing rapid growth and development, and their delicate developmental processes are easily disrupted. Children have exquisitely complex and delicate developmental processes. These processes have been compared to a complex symphony in which each instrument has to play the correct note at precisely the right moment, or the result is chaos. The processes are orchestrated with clockwork precision during the 9 months of pregnancy. They continue after birth, through early childhood, and even into adolescence and adult life. During the 9 months of pregnancy, the orchestra is playing at a sophisticated pace. Each minute, each hour, and each day produce major, noticeable changes in the developing baby. In order for a child to develop normally, predictable events must occur at very specific times. Cells multiply and move in a complicated dance pattern to form the brain and nervous system and to develop the arms, legs, and facial features. At the same time, other cells are moving to form and develop internal organs, the immune system, and the reproductive organs. All of these fast-moving changes are closely controlled by natural hormones. Hormones are powerful chemicals secreted in minute amounts by the endocrine glands in the body, which include the pituitary gland, the thyroid, the adrenal glands, the ovaries, and the testicles. Hormones act as signaling chemicals that direct cells in the body to turn switches on and off, to go fast or to slow down. Hormones regulate growth and development in infants and children, reproduction in young adults, and aging in older adults. The network of hormones in the human body is called the endocrine system, that works as a complex computer in which messages are transmitted between cells via chemical messengers rather than via electrical signals. A child's development does not stop at birth. During infancy, childhood, and puberty, equally complex growth and development occur. The continuum of rapid development is now quite visible as the infant grows into a young child marked by new abilities and behaviors. This great complexity of early human development creates windows of vulnerability, which are periods of heightened sensitivity to toxic chemicals that exist only in early life and have no counterpart in adulthood. Most of the windows of vulnerability occur during the 9 months of pregnancy, and others occur during early childhood. Exposures to even-minute quantities of toxic chemicals during these sensitive periods, at levels that would have no adverse effect on an adult, can lead to permanent injury to the brain, reproductive organs, immune system, and other organ systems. Fourth, children have more future years of life than do most adults, with more time to develop non-communicable diseases that may have been triggered by early environmental exposure. Compared with adults, children have many more years ahead of them. This means that children have a much longer period of time during which they may develop a disease that is caused by early life exposures to toxic chemicals. In fact, many debilitating diseases triggered by toxic chemicals, such as cancer and brain diseases, are now understood to evolve over the course of many years or even decades. This time is termed an incubation period or latency period. Furthermore, some of the serious neurological diseases, such as Parkinson's disease, and certain types of cancers are now suspected of having links with early exposures to toxic chemicals in the environment, even exposures in the womb. Copyright Academy House www.academy.house